imagine you move into this beautiful historic house,
Okay.
right? And after a few months, you start noticing the leaves on your favorite house plant are, turning brown. So what do? You buy an expensive fertilizer,
Naturally.
right? But then you start getting these persistent headaches. So you stock up on pain relievers, and eventually your dog gets super lethargic, so you completely switch out his diet. You're spending all this time, all this energy just managing these isolated problems.
Putting out little fires everywhere.
Exactly. But what if all of these issues, the dying plant, the headaches, the sick dog, what if they're actually just symptoms of a single slow carbon monoxide leak down in the basement?
Hmm.
I mean, modern medicine, for all its miraculous advancements, it often just treats the dying plant. It hands you an aspirin for the headache.
Right. It's highly compartmentalized.
We manage the symptoms, but we rarely, if ever, actually tear at the floorboards to look for that invisible leak.
And, that perspective just completely shifts the burden of diagnosis. We've built this medical paradigm that is remarkably skilled at that compartmentalization you just mentioned. Like, if you have a skin issue, you go see a dermatologist, right?
And they give you a cream.
Exactly. A topical cream to just suppress the immune response right there on the skin.
Mhm.
Or if you have joint pain, a rheumatologist prescribes an anti-inflammatory. But the underlying assumption there is that the body is just this collection of isolated machines.
Like a car with different parts breaking down independently.
Exactly. But we forget that the body is a single, highly integrated ecological system. I mean, silencing an alarm bell in one room doesn't mean the house isn't still on fire.
That is so true. And, that shift in perspective, that is the entire mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking a massive rapid-fire Q&A session from a leading health and wellness protocol that, frankly, it just completely rejects the idea of treating isolated symptoms.
It really does. It goes straight for the root.
Yeah, and the data we're looking at today covers a truly staggering spectrum of human health. We are talking about everything from something as mundane as avoiding fish oil burps, which we've all dealt with, all the way to navigating severe post-chemotherapy recovery.
It's a huge range.
It is managing extreme autoimmune diseases like lupus and even slowing cognitive decline and dementia. It's a massive net, but the underlying philosophy is just unyielding. We have to uncover the hidden root causes. So we're looking at protocols designed to detect heavy metals leaching from your tap water and strategies to optimize the body's natural defense systems rather than just chemically overriding them. So, okay, let's unpack this. With a data set this broad, where do we even establish a starting point?
Well, what's so fascinating here is that whether we're discussing the severe cramping of a menstrual cycle or the joint degradation in arthritis or even profound memory loss in neurocognitive disorders, the protocols just repeatedly direct us back to the exact same foundational elements.
So it all comes back to the same basics.
Every time. It all comes down to environmental inputs, nutritional deficiencies, and cellular mechanics. The central argument being made in the source material is that a failure in the brain or the skin or the joints, it's almost never a localized random glitch.
It's not just bad luck.
No, it is a systemic reaction.
Yeah.
It's the body attempting to adapt to a toxic environmental input or a really profound nutritional deficit.
Which, if you think about it, is incredibly empowering for you as a listener. Whether you are currently managing a frustrating chronic condition or trying to optimize an athletic routine or just insanely curious about the weird biology of the human body, there is a specific actionable protocol in here for you.
Absolutely.
But before we get to the severe interventions, the literature draws a hard line. It says you have to establish the baseline. We have to get the daily foundations right. Because if your daily baseline is broken, no advanced medical intervention, no specialized peptide or therapy is going to stick.
You're just building a house on sand at that point.
Right. And it turns out the basic supplements that millions of people blindly swallow every single morning are often being taken in a way that renders them completely useless or even actively inflammatory.
Yeah, the foundational materials are just non-negotiable. I mean, you cannot rebuild a diseased body if the raw materials you're dumping into the cellular machinery every morning are biologically incompatible or structurally flawed.
So let's start with one of the most common habits in the world, which is taking fish oil. Millions of people do it for heart and brain health. But the notes here argue that taking the wrong fish oil is basically a massive waste of time and money.
It can actually be worse than a waste of money, honestly.
Really? Well, the protocol dictates that concentration and sourcing are everything. You have to look for deep-sea small fish. Specifically, they highlight mackerel and sardines. And the ratio must be exactly 2-to-1 omega-3 fatty acids to omega-6 fatty acids. Let's break this down a bit.
Yeah.
Why is the physical size of the fish so critical to the cellular health of the human taking the oil?
It all relies on understanding a biological reality called biomagnification.
Biomagnification.
Okay, right. To grasp this, we have to look at the oceanic food chain. Our oceans, unfortunately, are heavily burdened with environmental toxins. We're talking methylmercury, microplastics, industrial runoff.
Which is incredibly sad, but true.
It is. Now, when microscopic plankton absorb a minuscule amount of these toxins, it's a negligible volume. But then, a small fish eats thousands of those plankton over its short life. Then, a medium fish eats thousands of those small fish.
It's just compounding all the way up.
Exactly. By the time you reach the apex predators, the massive, long-living species like tuna, swordfish, certain sharks, they have bioaccumulated a massive concentration of heavy metals from every single trophic level beneath them.
So the bigger, older fish are essentially swimming toxic storage facilities.
That is the harsh biological reality. So when a supplement company extracts oil from a massive, long-living fish to make a cheap supplement, they aren't just extracting omega-3s, they're also extracting and concentrating those lipid-soluble heavy metals.
Oh, wow. So you're basically swallowing concentrated ocean pollution.
Essentially, yes. By sourcing oil exclusively from the bottom of the food chain, the small, short-lived fish like sardines and mackerel, you are harvesting the beneficial omega fatty acids before they've had the chronological time or the dietary exposure to become heavily contaminated.
Okay, that makes the sourcing mandate very clear. Buy small fish oil. But what about that specific 2-to-1 ratio? Why do we need double the omega-3s compared to omega-6s?
That ratio is entirely about managing the inflammatory pathways at the cellular membrane level. Both omega-3 and omega-6 are essential fatty acids, meaning your body cannot make them, you have to eat them.
Right, they're essential.
But they serve very entirely different chemical functions. Omega-6 fatty acids generally feed into a pathway that produces arachidonic acid, which the body uses to synthesize pro-inflammatory molecules.
Okay, but we need some inflammation, right?
We do. You need inflammation to heal wounds and fight off infections. But the standard modern diet, which is just heavy in processed seed oils and grain-fed meats, is wildly over-indexed in omega-6s.
So we are constantly feeding the fire.
Exactly. We are trapped in a state of chronic systemic inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, they compete for the exact same enzymes that omega-6s use, but they produce anti-inflammatory molecules.
Oh, so it's literally a competition for the enzymes.
Yes. So by flooding the system with a 2-to-1 ratio favoring omega-3s, you are forcefully rebalancing that cellular scale. You're cooling the systemic inflammation from the cell membrane outward.
Okay, so we find the small fish oil, we get the right ratio. But here is the practical reality that makes people quit taking it altogether. The dreaded fish burp.
Oh, yeah. Nobody likes that.
It's awful. You swallow a capsule, and for the next 4 hours, you are tasting a fish market. But the notes offer a specific hack to avoid this, which is to freeze the fish oil capsules. The claim is that taking them frozen allows the capsule to bypass the upper digestive tract and thaw deeper in the stomach. Now, my immediate thought when I read this was skepticism.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it sounds like a clever trick, but we were talking about delicate lipids, right? If I throw my high-quality, expensive omega-3s into the freezer, am I fundamentally changing their molecular structure? Like, is this degrading the supplement just to save me some discomfort?
It's a really vital question to ask because applying extreme temperatures to biological compounds often destroys them, like denaturing proteins with heat is a classic example.
Right, like cooking an egg.
Exactly. However, the physical chemistry of these specific polyunsaturated fatty acids is unique. Freezing them does not alter their molecular structure or their biological efficacy. Because they're oils, they don't form the jagged, cell-puncturing ice crystals that water-based biological tissues do when they freeze.
Oh, okay. So we aren't shredding the lipid molecule.
No, not at all. You are merely changing their physical state temporarily to exploit your own digestive timeline, because freezing dramatically slows down the dissolution rate of the gelatin or vegan casing of the pill.
So it survives longer.
Right. Your stomach is a highly acidic, churning environment. Normally, a room temperature capsule dissolves almost instantly at the very top of the stomach. And that releases the oil where the resulting gases can easily escape back up through the cardiac sphincter. That's the valve separating your stomach and esophagus.
Hence the burps.
Exactly. But a frozen capsule requires significantly more thermodynamic energy to melt. So by the time the icy casing finally breaches and releases the oil, gastric motility has already pushed it way deeper into the digestive tract. It's moving toward the pyloric sphincter and the small intestine.
So the gases are trapped down below.
Yes, they're trapped below the physical churning of the stomach, which makes the burping physically impossible. It's a purely mechanical intervention that preserves the chemical integrity of the supplement.
I love when the mechanics of the body can be hacked that simply. That's brilliant. So let's move to the next foundational pillar, which focuses on B vitamins. The protocols are very rigid here. It's not enough to just buy a generic B complex from the grocery store.
Definitely not.
The notes mandate methylated B vitamins. They list specific brands like Thorne, they highlight their MethylGuard plus pure encapsulations, and Symbiotica. Specifically, they say to check the label for methylcobalamin and the methylfolate forms of folic acid. Now, someone is just walking down the supplement aisle. The word methylated sounds like a marketing buzzword designed to justify a higher price tag.
It does sound like jargon.
What is chemically happening here?
It is arguably one of the most important distinctions in nutritional biochemistry. Methylation is not a marketing term. It's a fundamental biochemical process that occurs billions of times a second in every single cell of your body.
Billions of times a second.
Yes. At a structural level, methylation is simply the transfer of a methyl group, which is just one carbon atom bonded to 3 hydrogen atoms from one molecule to another. But biologically, this transfer acts as the ultimate on switch.
So an unmethylated vitamin is essentially turned off.
It is completely inert. Unmethylated B vitamins, like the cheap synthetic folic acid found in fortified cereals and low-tier supplements, they are essentially raw ore.
Raw ore.
Right. And your body's cells cannot utilize raw ore. When you consume standard folic acid, it has to be transported to the liver, run through a very complex enzymatic assembly line, and have a methyl group physically attached to it before it becomes active methylfolate.
Okay, so the body has to process it first.
Yes. Only then does it become the biological currency your cells can actually spend to synthesize neurotransmitters, repair DNA, and produce cellular energy.
That makes sense in a perfectly functioning body.
Yeah.
But why do the notes insist we buy the pre-methylated versions? Can't our livers just do that work?
Well, here's the catch. For a massive segment of the human population, the liver's assembly line is genetically broken. Upwards of 40% of people carry a genetic mutation, most notably variations of the MTHFR gene.
40%, that's huge.
It's incredibly common, and this mutation severely impairs the body's ability to produce the specific enzyme required to attach that methyl group.
So if someone with this genetic mutation takes a cheap, unmethylated B vitamin, what happens? Does the body just flush it out?
Actually, it's worse than that. It can cause toxicity. The raw, unusable folic acid begins to build up in the bloodstream. Because the body cannot convert it, it cannot properly manage homocysteine levels.
So what does elevated homocysteine do?
It's a massive driver of cardiovascular inflammation and neurodegenerative issues. Furthermore, the synthetic folic acid can physically block the cellular receptors, preventing whatever small amount of active folate you actually do have from doing its job.
Oh, wow, so it's actively getting in the way.
Exactly. By taking pre-methylated vitamins, methylcobalamin instead of cyanocobalamin, methylfolate instead of folic acid, you completely bypass the genetic mutation and the liver's bottleneck. You are handing your cells a finished, ready-to-spend biological currency.
It's like trying to buy groceries with gold ore instead of cash. You might technically possess the value, but the cashier can't do anything with it until you take it to a refinery. Taking methylated vitamins is just handing the cashier the exact change.
That's a perfect analogy.
So let's look at the third foundational piece, which involves a supplement that requires absolutely no digestion at all: grounding and earthing. The literature presents a very specific good, better, best hierarchy for human movement.
This is one of my favorite topics.
It's super interesting. So good is walking on a treadmill. Better is walking outside. But the absolute gold standard, the protocol they push for, is walking outside in natural sunlight, completely barefoot on the earth without wearing sunglasses.
Yes, Mother Nature is the preferred source.
They do concede that for people living in freezing climates, grounding sheets, which are conductive mats plugged into the ground port of an electrical outlet, are acceptable alternatives.
Yeah.
Now, I have to be honest here. Telling someone to take their shoes off and walk in the dirt sounds a bit mystical. What is the actual biophysics behind earthing?
I get that. It only sounds mystical because modern society has entirely divorced itself from the electrical reality of our planet. The Earth is essentially a massive 6 sextillion-ton battery. Yes. Its surface maintains a continuous, naturally negative electrical charge. It's constantly replenished by global lightning strikes and atmospheric dynamics. This means the surface of the Earth is just teeming with free electrons.
And humans evolved in direct contact with that surface.
Precisely. For the entirety of hominid evolution, we slept on the ground and walked barefoot or in conductive leather hides. Our biology adapted to use the Earth as a constant source of electron absorption.
But why does absorbing electrons matter for our health today?
Because the primary driver of aging and chronic disease is oxidative stress, which is caused by free radicals. Free radicals are simply molecules that are missing an electron. They are highly unstable, so they violently tear electrons away from your healthy cellular tissue, which damages your DNA and your cell membranes in the process.
Creating systemic inflammation.
Exactly. But when you make direct, skin-to-earth contact, you are physically absorbing millions of free electrons straight from the ground. These electrons act as potent, natural, limitless antioxidants. They freely give themselves to the unstable free radicals, instantly neutralizing them and halting the inflammatory cascade.
So by putting on shoes, we block that.
Right. The moment we invented synthetic, rubber-soled shoes, we effectively insulated ourselves from the most powerful anti-inflammatory resource on the planet. We became electrically disconnected.
That completely reframes the entire concept of walking barefoot. It's not just a hippie thing, it's biophysics. But let's look at the other strict rule in this protocol, which is no sunglasses. I wear sunglasses purely to protect my eyes from UV damage. Why do the protocols explicitly demand that we expose unprotected eyes to the morning sun?
This brings us to the profound mechanisms of circadian biology. Your entire endocrine system, your metabolism, your mood, your sleep cycles, they are all governed by a 24-hour master clock located in a region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that clock doesn't run on a mechanical spring, it runs on light. Specifically, it relies on intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs, which are located in the back of your eye.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But these cells, they don't form images. Their only job is to detect the specific wavelength and intensity of natural full-spectrum sunlight.
So they are essentially light meters for the brain.
Exactly. When you step outside in the morning without sunglasses, full-spectrum sunlight hits those receptors. They instantly send a high-voltage neural signal directly to the brain that says, hey, it is officially daytime. The brain responds by halting the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone. It initiates a healthy spike in cortisol to give you energy, and it begins synthesizing serotonin, which will later be converted into melatonin for that night's sleep.
Okay, so what happens when I put on my polarized sunglasses for a morning walk?
You are artificially simulating twilight. You're placing a dark filter over the light meters. The brain receives a muted, confused signal. It assumes the sun is either still rising or already setting.
So you don't get that wake-up signal.
Exactly. The morning cortisol spike is blunted, leaving you lethargic and reaching for caffeine. The serotonin synthesis is delayed. And because the brain never received the aggressive morning signal, it won't know when to release melatonin 14 hours later, which leads to insomnia. We are actively biohacking our own hormones in the wrong direction just by trying to shade our eyes.
That is wild. It's crazy to realize how deeply intertwined our baseline biochemistry is with the physical environment. But establishing this baseline brings up a pretty terrifying question. What if you do everything right?
Right. What if you're doing the protocol perfectly?
Yeah. What if you are taking the methylated vitamins, eating the pristine fish oil, grounding in the morning sun, and you are still suffering from severe, debilitating health issues? What if you are still facing chronic fatigue, severe arthritis, or lupus?
That's where things get really complex.
Right. The protocol suggests that if the baseline is solid but the body is failing, we must stop looking at what we are failing to put into the body and start aggressively hunting for what might be secretly hiding inside it. We have to look for the unseen invaders.
The hidden triggers.
Yes. The literature makes a very bold statement regarding autoimmune conditions like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. It states, and I quote, "Things that we think are happening to us are happening within us." They argue these conditions are rarely just genetic bad luck. They are kicked off by hidden triggers.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. The protocol recommends a specific suite of 5 tests to find these triggers: mold, mycotoxins, metals, viral panels, and a high-quality parasite test.
The logic here relies on a much deeper understanding of immunology. I mean, conventional medicine often explains autoimmune disease as the immune system simply going rogue. The prevailing narrative is that your body randomly becomes confused and decides to aggressively attack your own thyroid gland or the synovial fluid in your joints.
Right. The idea is that the body's defense system just randomly commits treason against itself. But that has always seemed biologically strange to me. Why would an organism evolved for survival suddenly do that for no reason?
It wouldn't. And that is exactly what these protocols are challenging. The immune system is a highly sophisticated, deeply intelligent standing army. It doesn't drop bombs on its own cities without provocation.
Okay, so what is provoking it?
What the source materials are pointing to is a phenomenon heavily researched in advanced immunology, centering around chronic immune exhaustion and something called molecular mimicry.
Molecular mimicry, what is that?
Let's imagine a patient who is exposed to toxic black mold from a slow water leak behind the drywall of their bedroom. Every single night for 5 years, they inhale microscopic mycotoxins. Or perhaps they have a dormant viral load, like Epstein-Barr virus, that never fully cleared. The immune system recognizes these deeply embedded, low-grade invaders, so it mounts a defense.
That makes sense.
But because the exposure is constant, the immune system is locked in a state of hypervigilant warfare for years on end.
The army is deployed, but the war never ends.
Precisely. Over time, that constant state of high alert causes a breakdown in what we call self-tolerance. The immune cells become exhausted and, frankly, sloppy. And this is where molecular mimicry comes in. The protein structures on the surface of a hidden virus or a mycotoxin might slightly resemble the protein structures of your own healthy tissues, like the cartilage in your knees or the myelin sheath around your nerves.
Oh, wow. So the exhausted immune cells see the cartilage, confuse it for the mycotoxin because the proteins look similar, and just open fire.
Exactly. It is friendly fire. That friendly fire resulting in tissue destruction and immense pain is what we label as an autoimmune disease. But the arthritis isn't the root problem, it is the collateral damage.
That completely shatters the traditional treatment model. Because if the joint pain is just friendly fire from a secret war against mold, then prescribing an immunosuppressant, which is the standard medical response, is literally just disabling your own army while leaving the mold free to proliferate.
It's managing the symptom while ignoring the root cause entirely.
And speaking of these hidden enemies, the protocols place a massive emphasis on heavy metal and copper toxicity. They argue this is a major, unseen trigger for systemic breakdown. And the most terrifying part is where they say we are getting inoculated our unfiltered tap water.
This is a colossal public health blind spot.
It really is. They point out that despite water treatment plants, aging municipal infrastructure and lenient local allowances mean copper, lead, and other heavy metals are flowing straight out of our kitchen faucets.
Right. The assumption is that because water is deemed safe at the municipal treatment plant, it arrives in our glass in the exact same pristine condition. But that ignores the physical reality of water distribution.
It has to travel a long way.
Exactly. That water must travel through miles of degrading underground infrastructure, old lead-soldered joints, and corroding copper pipes inside older homes. Water is a universal solvent. As it travels, it aggressively leaches microscopic metal ions from those pipes.
I think most people assume that if they were actually suffering from heavy metal toxicity, their doctor would have caught it during an annual physical. But the notes highlight a critical testing dilemma, which is that metals evade standard blood and urine tests.
They do.
If I am drinking lead-contaminated water, why would my standard blood work come back looking completely normal?
Because your body is ruthlessly efficient at survival triage. Heavy metals are highly reactive. Free-floating lead, mercury, or excess copper in the bloodstream acts like microscopic shrapnel. It causes immediate catastrophic oxidative damage to the delicate endothelial lining of your blood vessels and vital organs.
So the body realizes it's an emergency.
Right. The central nervous system recognizes that leaving these metals in systemic circulation is an immediate life-threatening crisis. So what does the body do? It immediately sweeps them out of the blood and sequesters them into deep, dense tissues where they will cause less acute damage.
So it hides them.
Yes. It locks them away in fat cells, it buries them deep inside bone marrow, and tragically, it stores them in the lipid-rich tissues of the brain.
So a standard blood test fails because it's only looking in the hallway, but the body has already hidden the intruders inside locked rooms.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. The blood is merely the transit highway. That is not the storage facility. If you only test the blood, you will inevitably get a false negative.
This makes the recommended testing protocol so fascinating, because to actually find these metals, the literature insists on a chelation the fourth, followed immediately by an 8-hour urine collection test. What exactly is a chelation the fourth doing that a blood draw isn't?
A chelating agent, commonly substances like EDTA or DMSA, is a specialized claw-like molecule. When it's introduced intravenously, it travels through the bloodstream and penetrates those tissue barriers. Once it encounters a heavy metal ion buried in the tissue, it forms a tight, irreversible ionic bond around it.
He grabbed it.
It literally grabs the metal out of the bone marrow or the fat cells, drags it back into the bloodstream, and forces the kidneys to filter it out.
You're sending in a chemical extraction team.
Precisely. That is why the patient must collect their urine for 8 hours following the IV. You are not measuring what was naturally floating in the blood. You are quantitatively measuring the toxic payload that was forcibly evicted from the deep tissues.
Wow. The protocols also mention a secondary non-invasive method using light technology applied to the palm of the hand. How does that work?
That relies on the principles of spectrophotometry. Different metal ions stored in the dermal and subdermal tissues reflect specific frequencies of light. By reading the scattered light reflecting back from the palm, the device can estimate the tissue burden of heavy metals. It's a fantastic screening tool, though the chelation challenge remains the gold standard for exact quantification.
But practically speaking, if we discover that tap water is indeed the culprit, what is the everyday intervention? I mean, I have a standard pitcher filter in my fridge with a little carbon cartridge. Is that doing anything to protect me from dissolved copper or lead, or does this require a more extreme approach?
This is a harsh reality for many consumers. Standard pitcher filters are designed primarily for aesthetic improvement. They remove chlorine to improve taste and trap larger sedimentary impurities.
So they don't get the metals.
No. The carbon blocks in those pitchers are generally not dense enough, nor is the contact time long enough to reliably strip out dissolved heavy metal ions, microplastics, or fluoride. To actually mitigate heavy metal exposure at the tap, you have to utilize under-sink reverse osmosis systems, which force water through a semi-permeable membrane at high pressure, or whole house filtration systems utilizing specialized media, like KDF filters, specifically engineered for redox reactions that neutralize heavy metals.
Okay, so let's say we've done the testing. We found the mold in the house. We found the heavy metals hiding in our tissues. The obvious next step is to clear them out. You can't just bag up the garbage and leave it sitting in the living room. You have to physically haul it away.
Right, you have to get it out of the body.
This brings us to the mechanics of detoxification and the profound connection between our internal filtration systems and external diseases. The protocols point directly to the liver and the gallbladder as the primary engines of this clearing process. The two key nutrients heavily emphasized are milk thistle and glutathione. The notes refer to glutathione as the master antioxidant, pointing out that it resides in literally every single living cell in the human body. But it also notes that many chronically ill people suffer from impaired glutathione synthesis.
To understand why glutathione is so vital, we have to look at the chemistry of the liver. The liver is the body's central chemical processing plant. When a toxic molecule, say a pesticide residue or a mobilized heavy metal enters the liver, it is highly fat-soluble.
Okay.
The liver has to convert it into a water-soluble compound so the kidneys or the bowels can actually excrete it. However, phase 1 of this conversion process is violent. It generates massive amounts of highly reactive, cell-destroying free radicals like superoxide hydroxyl radicals.
So the detox process itself creates toxins.
Exactly. And this is where glutathione comes in. Glutathione is a simple tripeptide composed of 3 amino acids: glutamine, glycine, and cysteine. Its entire biological purpose is to act as an electron donor. It operates like a cellular hazmat team, sacrificing itself by handing an electron over to the dangerous free radical, instantly neutralizing it before it can rip apart the liver's own DNA.
So when the text says synthesis is impaired, it means the liver is out of ammunition.
Exactly. When the toxic burden is too high for too long, the liver simply cannot manufacture glutathione fast enough to keep up with the free radicals it is generating. The hazmat team is wiped out, the toxins remain unprocessed, and the resultant oxidative stress damages the liver tissue itself.
So how do we fix that?
Supplementing with specific, highly absorbable forms of glutathione alongside milk thistle, which contains silymarin, a compound proven to protect liver cell membranes and stimulate the natural regeneration of glutathione, is how we actively restock the liver's chemical arsenal.
But the protocol doesn't stop at the liver. To actually get these neutralized toxins out of the body, the literature strongly recommends using gut binders. They specifically list activated charcoal, silica clay, or zeolite. Now, this is the part I need you to clarify. If the liver has already successfully processed the heavy metal or the mycotoxin, why do I need to swallow charcoal? Doesn't the toxin just naturally travel through the intestines and leave the body?
In a perfect system, yes. But human anatomy has a built-in recycling mechanism that often turns detoxification into a nightmare.
A recycling mechanism.
Yes. Once the liver processes a toxin, it packages it into bile. The gallbladder then squirts that toxic bile into the duodenum, the very top of the small intestine, to aid in digestion and eventually be excreted.
Okay, so far so good.
However, the lining of the small and large intestine is designed for maximum absorption. It is actively searching for nutrients and water to pull back into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the intestine is also highly efficient at reabsorbing bile, along with the toxins trapped inside it.
Oh man, so the body accidentally recycles its own garbage.
Yes, it is a process known as enterohepatic circulation. The toxin is dumped into the gut, the intestinal wall reabsorbs it back into the blood carries it straight back to the liver, and the exhausted liver has to process the exact same toxin all over again. It is an endless, agonizing loop.
That sounds completely defeating. Like sweeping dirt out the front door, only for a gust of wind to blow it right back through the window.
That's exactly what it's like. And this is why gut binders are non-negotiable in a proper detox protocol. Binders like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, and zeolite are entirely inert. Your body does not digest or absorb them. At a microscopic level, they are heavily porous structures with strong negative electrical charges.
So they act like magnets.
Exactly. When you ingest a binder, it travels down the digestive tract like a giant negatively charged sponge. It encounters the positively charged toxins in the bile and utilizes van der Waals forces to lock them tightly within its porous structure. Once the toxin is bound to the charcoal or clay, it physically cannot be reabsorbed by the intestinal wall. The binder ensures that the garbage is escorted all the way down the digestive tract and safely excreted.
It provides the physical vehicle to carry the trash out. That is fascinating. And this concept of aggressive internal cleansing leads to one of the most intense specific protocols in the entire source material regarding psoriasis.
This one is quite controversial.
It really is. We typically view psoriasis as a localized skin condition. You get thick, red, itchy, scaly patches on your elbows or scalp, so you go to a dermatologist and get a corticosteroid cream. You treat the skin. But the protocols here frame psoriasis entirely as an external symptom of an internal systemic blockage.
And the intervention is pretty extreme.
Very extreme. Their recommended intervention is wild. They say to aggressively cleanse the liver, remove all processed foods, and then, here's the extreme part, adopt a strict carnivore diet for 10 weeks. They allow only eggs, berries, and natural honey. They also mandate hydrating with hydrogen-rich water and bathing in hydrogen water during flare-ups.
Right.
Now, I have to challenge this. A strict carnivore diet. We've been told by every major health authority for decades that plant fiber, leafy greens, and vegetables are the ultimate foundation of health. Why on earth would a protocol demand the total elimination of vegetables to heal a skin condition? Aren't you just starving the gut microbiome of the fiber it needs?
That is the natural, logical pushback based on standard nutritional education. To understand this intervention, you have to view it through the dual lenses of evolutionary biology and severe immunological dysfunction.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, let's address the plants. Animals have defense mechanisms, right? They can run away, they have claws, they can hide. Plants are rooted to the ground. Their only evolutionary defense mechanism against being eaten to extinction is chemical warfare.
Chemical warfare.
Yes, many vegetables, seeds, and legumes produce potent chemical defenses. Oxalates, lectins, phytates, and salicylates. These are designed to act as neurotoxins or digestive disruptors in the insects or animals that consume them.
Wait. So a spinach salad is secretly trying to poison me.
In a highly localized microdose capacity, yes. Now, for a healthy human being with a robust, intact mucosal lining in their gut and a calm immune system, these plant chemicals are handled easily. In fact, they act as a mild hormetic stressor. They challenge the body just enough to make it stronger, much like lifting weights tears muscle to build it back denser.
Okay, so it's good for healthy people.
Exactly. But we are not talking about a healthy person here. We are talking about a patient with severe psoriasis. This is a patient whose immune system is already hyperreactive, exhausted, and likely dealing with severe intestinal permeability, what we call a leaky gut.
So the toxins get through.
Right. For this patient, the lectins in a tomato or the oxalates in spinach are not a healthy challenge. They are pouring gasoline on an already raging immunological fire. The plant toxins leak through the damaged gut wall straight into the bloodstream, and the hypervigilant immune system attacks them violently. That massive internal inflammatory response ultimately manifests externally as the rapid, uncontrolled turnover of skin cells, which is psoriasis.
Okay, I understand the plant toxin theory, but doesn't removing all fiber ever completely decimate the beneficial bacteria in the gut?
It undeniably alters the microbiome dramatically. But remember, the protocol specifies a 10-week intervention, not necessarily a lifelong sentence. The theory behind the carnivore diet in this specific clinical context is that it acts as the ultimate zero-residue elimination diet.
Zero residue, what does that mean?
It means high-quality ruminant meat, like beef or lamb, is almost entirely absorbed in the small intestine. It produces virtually zero waste in the colon and contains absolutely zero plant defense chemicals. By stripping away every single plant compound for 10 weeks, you are giving the digestive tract and the hyperreactive immune system a profound, uninterrupted vacation.
A complete reset.
Yes, you are starving the pathogenic, overgrown bacteria that feed on fermentable fibers while simultaneously removing all immunological triggers. You allow the physical gut lining to heal, which stops the systemic inflammatory cascade, which eventually cools the skin.
It is a radical system reboot. And what about the specific instruction to drink and bathe in hydrogen water? What does hydrogen do?
Molecular hydrogen therapy is one of the most exciting frontiers in cellular recovery. Hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the physical universe. Because of its microscopic size, it can rapidly and effortlessly diffuse across all biological barriers. It penetrates the cellular membrane, enters the mitochondria, and easily crosses the blood-brain barrier.
So you go anywhere at once.
Anywhere. But its real magic lies in its selectivity. Typical antioxidants, like high-dose vitamin C, will neutralize any free radical they encounter. But some free radicals, like nitric oxide, are actually vital signaling molecules that our bodies need.
So we don't want to neutralize everything.
Right. Hydrogen acts as a highly selective antioxidant. It specifically targets and neutralizes only the most toxic, highly reactive free radicals, primarily the hydroxyl radical, which is infamous for destroying cellular DNA and aggravating severe skin conditions. By bathing inflamed psoriatic skin in hydrogen water, you are delivering targeted, highly permeable antioxidant therapy directly to the dermal cells without disrupting natural cellular signaling.
That is a brilliant mechanical explanation. Okay, so we've covered the slow chronic buildup of systemic toxicity, the misdirected immune responses, and how to aggressively clear the pathways. But the protocols transition into a much more immediate acute realm next.
Right, trauma and acute stress.
Exactly. What happens when the human body isn't just dealing with a slow leak, but is actively undergoing massive catastrophic physical stress? How do we support biological systems that are already pushed to the absolute brink without accidentally knocking them over the edge?
That's a very delicate balance.
This brings us to navigating severe physical stress, specifically covering post-chemotherapy recovery, intense menstrual disorders, and the surprisingly lethal realities of a sedentary lifestyle. Let's start with the most extreme scenario. Post-chemotherapy recovery. The literature lays down a very strict, non-negotiable rule. It states that recovering patients must absolutely avoid any unnecessary hormetic stress.
And that's crucial.
And they offer a highly specific supplement stack to repair the cellular damage. BPC 157, ashwagandha, liposomal or intravenous vitamin C, and high-dose vitamin D3 paired with vitamin K2. I want to dig into that first rule. We just talked about hormetic stress regarding plant toxins. The whole biohacking world is obsessed with hormesis, right? Cold plunges, aggressive saunas, 72-hour fasts. Why are these universally praised health practices suddenly forbidden for a chemo patient?
It comes down to understanding the critical difference between acute adaptation and total allostatic load. Hormesis is based on the biological principle that a brief, intense exposure to physical stress triggers an adaptive survival response that makes the organism stronger.
Like the cord plunge.
Right. You sit in freezing water, the body panics, upregulates mitochondrial production, and you become more resilient. But this entire mechanism assumes the organism has the baseline energy reserves required to mount that adaptive response. Allostatic load refers to the total cumulative burden of physiological wear and tear on the body.
The total weight on the system.
Exactly. A patient who has just completed chemotherapy has an allostatic load that is completely maxed out. Chemotherapeutic agents are, by design, systemic cellular poisons intended to aggressively eradicate rapidly dividing cancer cells. In the process, they obliterate the immune system, destroy the mucosal lining of the gut, and completely drain cellular energy reserves.
So the tank is completely empty.
Yes. If you take a profoundly depleted, recovering cancer patient and throw them into a freezing ice bath or force them to fast for 3 days, you are not triggering resilience. You are demanding an energetic response from a system that has zero energy left to give. You are inducing total biological
Oh,
collapse.
wow.
The literature is astutely pointing out that a post-chemo body requires pure, unadulterated regenerative support and cellular coddling. It needs raw building blocks, not more physiological challenges.
Stop revving an engine that has no oil in it. That leads directly to the regenerative stack they recommend. The most intriguing compound on that list is BPC-157, which they identify as a gastric pentadecapeptide. What exactly is a peptide, and mechanically, why is BPC-157 considered so miraculous for tissue repair?
Peptides are the biological software code of the human body. Structurally, they are simply short chains of amino acids, much smaller than full proteins. Their function is to act as highly specific signaling molecules. They bind to receptors on the surface of a cell and deliver a distinct command, telling the cell to release a hormone, reduce inflammation, or start dividing.
Okay, so it's a messenger.
Yes. BPC stands for Body Protection Compound. BPC-157 is a synthetic sequence of 15 amino acids that is naturally derived from human gastric juice. Its evolutionary purpose in the stomach is to rapidly heal ulcers and protect the gut lining from the highly acidic environment. But researchers discovered that when introduced systemically, its regenerative capabilities are staggering.
How does it actually fit the tissue, though?
Its primary mechanism of action is the aggressive upregulation of angiogenesis, the physiological process of forming new blood vessels from pre-existing ones. It heavily stimulates endothelial cell migration.
More blood vessels.
Yes. Whether a patient is dealing with a chemotherapy-destroyed intestinal lining, a torn Achilles tendon, or severe systemic inflammation, BPC-157 commands the body to rapidly build new vascular networks to that specific area. More blood vessels mean an immediate influx of oxygen, nutrients, and immune cells, vastly accelerating the physical repair of the damaged tissue.
It essentially builds a new supply highway directly to the disaster zone.
Exactly.
And looking at the rest of the stack, the logic continues. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen used to physically lower cortisol levels and pull the nervous system out of a chronic fight-or-flight state. But they specified liposomal or intravenous vitamin C for immune support. Why the specification? I can buy a massive bottle of vitamin C tablets for $10 at the pharmacy.
Because standard, cheap ascorbic acid tablets are severely limited by bowel tolerance. If you swallow 5,000 milligrams of standard vitamin C, the harsh environment of the gastrointestinal tract will destroy a large portion of it, and the intestinal wall physically cannot absorb that high of a dose at once.
So what happens to all the extra?
The unabsorbed excess remains in the gut, pulls water into the colon, and causes severe osmotic diarrhea. You simply cannot achieve the necessary therapeutic blood concentrations orally.
So the liposomal version fixes that.
Yes, liposomal technology solves this. The vitamin C molecules are encapsulated inside microscopic lipid bilayers, tiny bubbles of fat that mimic our own cell membranes. This fat bubble protects the vitamin from digestive acids and allows it to slip easily through the intestinal wall, delivering near intravenous concentrations of the antioxidant directly into the bloodstream and into the cells where the chemo-damaged immune system desperately needs it.
And the final piece, pairing high-dose vitamin D3 with K2. I know D3 is vital for immune function, but why is K2 mandatory?
Vitamin D3 acts more like a systemic hormone than a vitamin. One of its primary roles is to massively increase the absorption of calcium from your diet into your bloodstream. But D3 is blind. It pulls the calcium into the blood, but it doesn't know where to put it.
And calcium in a wrong spot is bad.
Very bad. If you take high doses of D3 alone, that circulating calcium can inappropriately deposit in the soft tissues, leading to calcified arteries or kidney stones. Vitamin K2 is the biological traffic cop. It activates specific proteins like osteocalcin, whose entire job is to bind to that free-floating calcium and direct it straight into the bone matrix and teeth, keeping the arteries clear and flexible.
It is incredible how these molecules depend entirely on one another to function safely. Now, let's pivot from the systemic trauma of chemo to a different kind of severe cyclical physical stress: extreme menstrual cramps and heavy bleeding.
This is an incredibly common issue that's often mismanaged.
Absolutely. The protocols outline a very clear sequential response. Step 1 is demanding a full hormone panel from an OBGYN. The notes insist the doctor must check for aphasic versus monophasic cycling and closely monitor DHEA and SHBG levels, especially noting that SHBG will skyrocket if the patient is on oral birth control. There's a lot of dense endocrinology jargon here. What exactly are aphasic and monophasic cycles, and why are DHEA and SHBG so critical to the diagnostic picture?
The terminology describes the rhythmic nature or the complete failure of a woman's hormonal baseline. A healthy menstrual cycle is highly dynamic. Estrogen and progesterone naturally rise and fall in a beautifully orchestrated multiphasic rhythm to trigger ovulation and menstruation.
Right.
When the protocols say to check for an aphasic cycle, they are looking for a complete lack of phases. An aphasic cycle is essentially an anovulatory cycle. The body is failing to ovulate, and the necessary rise in progesterone never happens.
Yeah.
The hormones are flatlined, which leads to severe metabolic disruption, chaotic bleeding, and immense pain.
Okay, and what about monophasic?
A monophasic cycle, on the other hand, is generally what happens when a woman is placed on standard oral contraceptives. The pill delivers the exact same synthetic dose of hormones every single day of the month. It forces a static, monophasic state that completely shuts down the natural, dynamic, infradian rhythm of the female body.
So they're looking to see if the natural hormonal rhythm is either broken or chemically suppressed. And what about DHEA and SHBG?
DHEA is a vital precursor hormone produced by the adrenal glands. It's essentially the raw material the body uses to manufacture both testosterone and estrogen. If DHEA is depleted due to chronic stress, the entire downstream hormonal cascade fails. But SHBG is perhaps the most critical mechanical marker here.
Why is that?
SHBG stands for sex hormone binding globulin. It is a protein manufactured by the liver. Its specific job is to bind onto sex hormones floating in the bloodstream, carrying them around safely. However, while a hormone is bound to SHBG, it is biologically inactive. It cannot enter the cells.
It's locked in the transport vehicle.
Exactly, and this is where the interaction with birth control becomes so problematic. Oral contraceptives must be metabolized by the liver. The liver perceives this influx of synthetic hormones as a massive toxic stressor, and its defensive response is to flood the bloodstream with SHBG.
Oh, wow. So what does that do to the hormones?
So a woman on the pill might have technically normal levels of testosterone or estrogen on a basic lab test, but because her SHBG is artificially skyrocketed, all of those hormones are tightly bound and locked away. Her tissues are essentially starving for hormones, leading to depression, loss of libido, lethargy, and severe downstream cramping, even though the raw numbers look fine.
So the protocol is forcing the doctor to look at the mechanical availability of the hormones, not just the raw volume.
Exactly.
That entirely changes how you would interpret a blood test. But moving from the diagnostics to immediate triage, the protocol focuses intensely on managing the physical blood loss to prevent anemia. They advise testing hemoglobin and red blood cell counts, and they offer a highly specific supplement, iron bisglycinate. They emphatically state to avoid cheap iron pills because they cause brutal constipation. They suggest taking this specific form every other day, and here's the most fascinating detail. The notes mention that preemptively taking this iron before the cycle begins is the best strategy to combat the physiological crash. They also note that a sudden craving for red meat is a literal biological alarm bell for this deficiency. Why is iron bisglycinate so much better than the standard iron supplements doctors prescribe?
It comes down to the destructive nature of free iron in the digestive tract. Standard medical advice often waits until a woman is clinically anemic, showing profound exhaustion, pale skin, hair loss before intervening with heavy iron salts, most commonly ferrous sulfate.
Right, you get a prescription for ferrous sulfate.
But the problem is that ferrous sulfate breaks apart violently in the highly acidic environment of the stomach, releasing free iron ions. These free ions are highly oxidative. They act like microscopic rust, severely irritating the mucosal lining of the stomach and intestines.
Microscopic rust in your stomach.
Yeah, it's awful. This local oxidative stress absolutely wrecks the gut microbiome and causes the intestinal muscles to spasm and halt, leading to the severe cramps and debilitating constipation universally associated with iron supplements.
So how is iron bisglycinate different?
Iron bisglycinate is completely structurally different. It is a chelate. The iron mineral is chemically bound wrapped tightly between two molecules of the amino acid glycine.
So the iron is hidden inside the amino acids.
Exactly. Because it is bound, it does not break apart in the stomach acid. It does not release free radicals into the gut. It glides smoothly through the digestive tract until it reaches the small intestine, where it is easily and efficiently absorbed through the amino acid transport channels. It provides massive, bioavailable iron replenishment without any of the destructive gastrointestinal side effects.
And the strategy of taking it before the cycle begins is such a powerful shift in perspective. It goes back to the concept of foundational preparation. To use a different analogy, if you know you are about to embark on a grueling high-speed road trip across the desert, you don't wait for the low fuel light to start flashing while you are already driving.
Right, you'd be stranded.
You don't wait until the engine is sputtering. You fill the gas tank to the absolute brim before you ever leave the driveway. Preloading the iron bisglycinate is just topping off the biological fuel tank before the inevitable loss occurs.
It is proactive rather than reactive medicine. It respects the physical toll the body is about to endure.
Which perfectly transitions us to the third type of physical stress highlighted in this section: the profoundly lethal silent stress of a sedentary lifestyle, specifically focusing on long-haul truck drivers. The protocols state unequivocally that long, continuous hours of sitting destroy human health.
It's an occupational hazard.
It is. The actionable advice for drivers is completely counterintuitive to how most people map out a road trip. The protocol insists that drivers must take more frequent, shorter breaks, specifically 3 15-minute walking breaks, rather than pushing through for 6 hours to take one long 45-minute break. They emphasize that the physical mechanics of walking naturally stimulate the brain, and they offer a severe warning against relying on chemical stimulants like high-dose caffeine, Adderall, or amphetamines to push through the exhaustion.
Right.
We all know sitting too much is bad, but mechanically, why is 6 continuous hours in a driver's seat so catastrophic to the body?
The phrase, "sitting is the new smoking," is not hyperbole. It is a vascular reality. When you sit rigidly in a seat for hours on end, you experience profound hemodynamic stagnation. Gravity pulls the blood down, and it literally pulls in the lower extremities, your calves and feet.
Okay, but why is that so dangerous?
To understand why this is dangerous, you have to understand the skeletal muscle pump. Your heart is powerful enough to pump arterial blood down to your toes, but it is not powerful enough to suck the venous blood all the way back up against gravity on its own.
Oh, I never thought of that.
It relies on the physical contraction of your calf and thigh muscles to forcefully squeeze the deep veins, pushing the blood upward.
So your legs act as secondary hearts.
Exactly. When you sit immobile for hours, those secondary hearts are completely turned off. The blood pools. This leads to a severe drop in endothelial shear stress, the healthy friction of blood flowing rapidly against the vessel walls, which tells the arteries to remain flexible.
So the arteries stiffen up.
Right. Without that friction, the vessels stiffen. The risk of deep vein thrombosis, lethal blood clots, skyrockets. Furthermore, the metabolic enzymes responsible for breaking down triglycerides, or fats, in the bloodstream plummet by over 90% after just a few hours of sitting.
So by pushing through and taking one long 45-minute break at the end of the day, you are still allowing the blood to pool, the fats to solidify, and the vessels to stiffen for 6 continuous uninterrupted hours. The damage is already done.
Precisely. The duration of the break is far less important than the frequency of the movement. Taking a brisk 15-minute walk every 2 hours acts as a hard metabolic restart button. It physically activates the skeletal muscle pump, violently flushing the stagnant blood and trapped metabolic waste products out of the extremities.
And that wakes you up naturally.
Yes. It spikes the fat-clearing enzymes back to baseline, and the increased circulation forces freshly oxygenated blood into the brain, naturally clearing the adenosine buildup that causes drowsiness.
Which explains the severe warning against stimulants. If a driver is fighting that natural drowsiness by popping an Adderall or chugging an energy drink, but they remain seated, what is physically happening inside the vascular system?
It is a recipe for an acute cardiovascular event. Amphetamines and massive doses of caffeine are potent vasoconstrictors. They physically shrink the diameter of the blood vessels. They also chemically force the heart to beat faster and harder.
Oh, man.
So consider the physical state. The blood is already thick and stagnant in the legs, the metabolic pathways are shut down, and now you introduce a chemical that clamps the blood vessels shut while simultaneously forcing the heart to slam against that increased resistance. It is the exact equivalent of revving a car engine to the absolute red line while keeping the emergency parking brake firmly pulled up.
The pressure builds until a gasket blows, or in this case, a vessel ruptures or a clot dislodges. It is a terrifying mechanical reality. And this reality of stagnation brings us to the final and undoubtedly most impactful exploration of our deep dive. Because the dangers of stagnation, chronic toxicity, and broken biological foundations do not just destroy the physical body, they eventually breach the final barrier and profoundly alter our most vital defining organ. Yes, we're moving from the physical systems to cognitive preservation and the protocols for slowing and potentially reversing dementia and neurocognitive decline. The interventions detailed here are truly on the cutting edge of regenerative science. The first protocol involves light and peptides for the brain. The notes state that near-infrared and red light therapy are showing unprecedented promise in neurorecovery.
This is revolutionary stuff.
It is.
Hmm.
They specifically detail the use of neuronic helmets devices designed to push specific wavelengths of red light deep into the brain tissue. The author of these protocols even notes he utilized this exact technology to aid his own parents' cognitive function. Alongside the light, they recommend the use of a peptide called cerebrolysine. I need to pause here. How does placing a helmet covered in red LEDs over your skull do absolutely anything to improve your memory? It sounds like pure science fiction.
It really sounds implausible until you look at the cellular biology of photobiomodulation.
Autobiomodulation.
Right. The underlying science here is hard physics and biochemistry. First, we have to recognize that the human skull is not a solid lead bunker. It is not completely opaque to all light. Specific, long wavelengths of light, specifically in the deep red and near-infrared spectrum, usually around 800 to 10^64 nanometers, have the physical capability to bypass the dermis, penetrate the bone of the skull, and reach the outer centimeters of the cerebral cortex.
So the photons of light are physically entering the brain tissue. Then what?
Once those photons hit the neurons, they interact directly with the mitochondria, the cellular power plants. Inside the mitochondria is a specific photoreceptive enzyme called cytochrome oxidase. When the red light photons strike this enzyme, it causes a structural change that violently kicks the cellular energy production cycle into overdrive.
So the red light is literally acting as a wireless battery charger for the brain cells.
That is an incredibly accurate description. It forces a massive upregulation in the production of ATP, the fundamental energy currency of the cell. In neurodegenerative diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's, the neurons are largely suffering from a profound chronic energy crisis. The mitochondria are failing, the cells are suffocating, starving, and slowly dying.
And the light provides the energy they need.
Exactly. The near-infrared light provides a massive external energy source. It bypasses the broken metabolic pathways, rescues the suffocating neurons, dramatically reduces localized neuroinflammation, and provides the energetic fuel required to stimulate the repair of the synaptic connections.
That is staggering. And how does the cerebrolysine peptide factor into this?
Cerebrolysine operates on a parallel regenerative wavelength. It is a complex mixture of purified neurotrophic factors, specifically proteins that encourage the survival, development, and function of neurons. It essentially mimics the action of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If the red light provides the raw energy required to rebuild the brain, cerebrolysine acts as the highly specific biological fertilizer that tells the neural networks to sprout new branches, form new synapses, and protect themselves against further oxidative damage.
So we're charging the battery and fertilizing the soil. The protocols also heavily emphasize the basics of circulation and movement for cognitive preservation. They advise keeping the patient hyperhydrated and constantly moving to slow the disorder. To mechanically aid this circulation, they recommend two specific compounds, vinpocetine and resveratrol. How do these two supplements specifically help the brain compared to just general exercise?
They act as targeted vascular optimizers, which perfectly complements the red light therapy. If the light is generating energy inside the cells, vinpocetine and resveratrol are widening the delivery highways to ensure that oxygen and raw nutrients actually reach those cells.
Okay, so widening the highways.
Yes. Vinpocetine is a fascinating synthetic derivative of an alkaloid found in the periwinkle plant. Mechanically, it functions as a selective phosphodiesterase type 1 inhibitor. What that means in practical terms is that it is a potent, highly selective cerebral vasodilator. It actively relaxes the smooth muscle cells lining the specific blood vessels located inside the brain, forcing them to open wider.
So it brings more blood specifically to the head.
Exactly. This significantly increases cerebral blood flow and oxygen delivery to the neurons without causing a dangerous systemic drop in blood pressure throughout the rest of the body.
It opens the floodgates specifically in the skull. And resveratrol.
Resveratrol, a polyphenol famously found in the skin of red grapes, works in tandem by protecting the structural integrity of those widened vessels. It actively stimulates the production of endothelial nitric oxide, which keeps the vessels flexible. And it activates ERT1 proteins, which heavily suppress oxidative stress and inflammation along the delicate vascular walls, preventing the microclots and plaque buildup that lead to vascular dementia.
But here's a section of the protocols that completely stopped me in my tracks. After discussing all of these advanced interventions to treat cognitive decline, the text drops an absolute bombshell under the topic of the misdiagnosis of dementia.
This is the part that changes everything.
The literature states that long-term viral loads, heavy metal toxicity, toxic mold, or mycotoxin exposure can mimic the exact identical symptoms of late-stage cognitive decline in dementia. I want you, the listener, to really internalize the gravity of this statement. How terrifying, and yet how profoundly hopeful is it to consider that the confusion, the loss of memory, the agonizing fading away of a loved one's personality might not actually be the irreversible death sentence of Alzheimer's disease? What if it is an entirely treatable mold infection caused by a leaky roof? What if it is heavy metals accumulated in the brain tissue from 30 years of drinking unfiltered tap water?
It is the ultimate unifying synthesis of every single biological mechanism we have discussed today. The brain is the ultimate canary in the coal mine of the human organism. It is the most energy-demanding, delicate, lipid-rich orchid we possess.
This is the first to show the damage.
Yes. If you connect the mechanistic dots from our foundational sections, the patient with the chronic leaky gut, the exhausted liver incapable of producing glutathione, the hidden heavy metals locked in the fat cells, the systemic inflammation from environmental mycotoxins, where do we think all of that unmitigated toxicity eventually ends up? It inevitably crosses the blood-brain barrier.
But how does that mimic Alzheimer's?
True Alzheimer's disease involves the permanent, irreversible accumulation of amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tau tangles that physically crush the neurons. However, severe heavy metal toxicity or profound neuroinflammation caused by a chronic mycotoxin infection will present clinically with the exact same behavioral symptoms: profound brain fog, short-term memory loss, loss of spatial awareness, and severe emotional volatility.
But if a standard physician just look at those behavioral symptoms, what happens?
They apply the black tape, they look at the symptoms, they look at the patient's age, and they write down a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. They might prescribe a drug to slightly delay the inevitable, and the patient is sent home to slowly, tragically fade away.
Which is heartbreaking.
It is. But if, instead, that physician applies the philosophy of the protocols we are examining today, if they actively hunt for the hidden invaders, if they run the intravenous chelation challenge to look for lead and mercury, if they order the advanced mycotoxin panels, they might find a completely reversible toxicity. By utilizing the binders, the peptides, and the red light therapy, they might literally give someone their mind back.
It is a complete and total paradigm shift. And it brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this massive exploration. Whether we are analyzing the biomagnification of toxins in fish oil, the biochemical mechanics of estrogen and iron during a menstrual cycle, the lethal hemodynamics of sitting in a truck for 6 hours, or the terrifying, hopeful frontiers of reversing neurocognitive decline, the path to becoming a truly optimized human being requires a dual, almost contradictory approach.
It's a balance.
You must deeply respect and actively reconnect with the ancient rules of Mother Nature. You have to seek out the free electrons from the Earth, you have to expose your unprotected eyes to natural morning sunlight, and you have to consume raw, unadulterated nutrients. But simultaneously, you must be willing to utilize the absolute bleeding edge of regenerative science like synthesized gastric peptides, targeted intravenous chelation, and near-infrared laser helmets to combat the highly unnatural, overwhelmingly toxic modern environment we have unknowingly built around ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I ask you, take a hard look at your own daily routines, your own medicine cabinet, and your own lingering, frustrating health complaints. Are you just treating the symptoms? Are you just managing the side effects of your modern lifestyle? Or are you willing to tear up the floorboards and hunt for the root cause? Are you actively looking for the unseen invaders?
And I want to leave you with a final, perhaps slightly provocative thought that builds directly on the implications of everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this time discussing the profound, often devastating medical impacts of our physical environment. The heavy metals leaching out of our aging municipal water pipes, the invisible toxic mold proliferating in our modern HVAC systems, the total lack of natural sunlight in our climate-controlled offices, the artificial blue light completely disrupting our circadian biology.
Right. Our environment is the trigger.
Exactly. If the hidden root drivers of our most feared, seemingly unstoppable diseases, from crippling autoimmune disorders to severe cognitive decline, are largely a product of our built environment, then the most important life-saving medical intervention of the next 50 years might not happen inside a hospital or a pharmaceutical laboratory.
Where would it happen?
It might require a complete revolution in how we engineer, ventilate, and physically build the houses and cities we live in. We may eventually need to stop begging physicians to cure us from the buildings that our architects designed.
That is a staggering thought. The architect as the ultimate preventative physician. It just highlights the inescapable reality. You cannot heal in the exact same toxic environment that made you sick in the first place.
We really can't.
It all comes back to that underlying philosophy. You have the power, you have the agency, and now hopefully you have a deeper understanding of the cellular mechanics required to stop blindly managing your symptoms. It might be intimidating to demand the heavy metal tests, to completely overhaul your diet, or to stand barefoot in the cold morning grass, but it is the only true path to finding the root cause. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the symptoms, keep hunting for the invisible leaks, and we will see you next time.